My name is Aria Blackstone, and I am 28 years old. At this moment, I find myself seated at the far end of our family dining table, in that position forever reserved for the secondary members of the household. The Greenwich mansion stood silent and dignified on this Christmas Eve. Crystal chandeliers hung from 15-foot ceilings, casting warm golden light across what appeared to be a perfect holiday dinner. The oak dining table was draped with hand-embroidered Irish linen, set with ancestral Royal Doulton china and Swarovski crystal glasses. "You are too emotional to handle real responsibility." My father, Victor Blackstone's voice echoed through the spacious dining room. His tone carried the authority honed through years of business dealings, each word delivered like a final verdict. He held his bone china coffee cup steady, much like his firm grip on this family's control. "That is why we passed the family business to your brother." Victor Blackstone, at 56 years old, was an imposing figure with immaculately styled silver hair. His charcoal gray custom suit came from the finest tailors on Savile Row, with cufflinks bearing the family crest. 30 years in the business world had etched authority into his features. Penetrating blue eyes, a resolute jaw, and that confident bearing characteristic of successful men. The dinner guests, all important figures from father's business circle, nodded in agreement. Mr. Henderson, father's 20-year golf partner and business associate, watched me with shrewd little eyes, his face bearing an expression of naturally so. There were also the Morrisons, who owned the largest real estate development company in the region, Mr. Young, vice president of the local bank, and several other business elite. My mother, Patricia, sat to Victor's left, smiling gracefully. At 52, she embodied the typical upper-class woman, blonde hair arranged in a perfect low chignon, wearing a Chanel beige suit with a Cartier diamond bracelet adorning her wrist. Her beauty had been refined by the passage of time, though it had also grown more distant. Patricia came from an old money Boston family, and her marriage to Victor was not only love, but an alliance between two business dynasties. My brother Ethan occupied the seat to father's right, that symbolic position of the heir. At 31, he possessed the typical Blackstone family features: tall stature, dark hair, sharp green eyes. He wore a deep blue Brioni suit, his face bearing a satisfied expression. From childhood, he had been the family's pride, the carefully groomed successor. Harvard Business School MBA, 3 years at Goldman Sachs, then returning to the family business as vice president. And I, the daughter deemed too emotional, sat at the edge of this power table and smiled. This smile caused Victor's brow to furrow. He clearly expected shame, argument, or tears, any emotional response that would prove his judgment correct. For the past 28 years, whenever he rendered such verdicts, I either silently accepted or emotionally objected, thereby further confirming his assessment of my being too emotional. But tonight was different. Tonight, I simply rose gracefully from my seat and walked toward my Hermès handbag, resting on a Venetian antique side table. My heels clicked softly against the polished marble floor, the only sound in the entire room. "Aria, we are having an important business discussion," Ethan said impatiently, his voice carrying that superiority he had grown accustomed to since childhood. "This is not the time for tantrums." I turned around, now holding a black folder in my hand. "I am not throwing a tantrum." My voice was so calm it surprised even me. I simply wanted to participate in this discussion about business responsibility. As I walked back to the dining table, all eyes focused on me. I gently placed the folder in the center of the table, right beside that $2,000 bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, next to Mother's carefully chosen white orchid arrangements. The words on the folder cover brought instant silence to the entire room. Nexus Corp Equity Acquisition Agreement. The table conversation ceased abruptly. Even the crackling sounds from the fireplace became exceptionally clear. Victor glanced at the document, his face showing a mixture of anger and disdain. Aria, these fake document games are childish. Nexus Corp is our biggest competitor, with a market value exceeding $125 billion. I calmly interrupted him, my voice clear as water. I completed the acquisition for $125 billion in cash plus $35 billion in debt assumption. The transaction was officially completed yesterday afternoon at 4:30, with all legal procedures finalized. Mr. Henderson's wineglass stopped mid-air. What? That is impossible! His voice trembled as the ruddiness quickly drained from his face. I opened the folder to the signature page, where various official seals, notary signatures, and legal clauses were displayed. Aurora Holdings, my private investment fund, is now the sole shareholder of Nexus Corp. Victor's smile vanished as quickly as ice meeting spring sunshine. He reached for the document, those hands that had remained steady through countless business negotiations now trembling slightly. He carefully examined the legal clauses, official seals, and signatures. Authentic documents, authentic signatures, authentic acquisition. Every page bore the official stamp of the Securities and Exchange Commission, certified by New York State's most authoritative commercial law firms. These were not documents anyone could forge. How did you... His voice began to quaver, that stability that had always supported his authoritative image beginning to crumble. Mrs. Morrison gasped, her diamond earrings sparkling under the chandelier light. Nexus Corp. Is that not the industry leader? Do you want to understand real business responsibility, Dad? I sat back down, my voice maintaining that unsettling calm. Let me tell you what true business landscape means. I surveyed those shocked faces around the table, each expression telling me their worldview was collapsing. Blackstone Dynamics, our family business, has annual revenue of $250 million, 800 employees, serving clients primarily in the New England region. My tone was like reciting a weather forecast. Nexus Corp, your so-called competitor, has annual revenue of $15 billion, controls 40% of global market share, employs 85,000 people across 6 continents, with clients including 320 Fortune 500 companies. Patricia's exquisite makeup could not hide the shock on her face, her perfect red lips slightly parted. Aria, are you saying... I am saying... My gaze swept across each person. That the competitor you have always dreamed of challenging, that business giant that makes Blackstone Dynamics look like a convenience store, now belongs to me. The bone china coffee cup in Victor's hand began trembling, dark coffee creating small ripples in the exquisite cup. That was an antique piece left by his grandmother, witnessing 3 generations of Blackstone family glory. From a purely business perspective, I continued, my voice carrying a barely perceptible edge, Blackstone Dynamics stands before Nexus Corp like a corner convenience store before Walmart. Your so-called strategic expansion and grand plans to change the industry landscape are merely interesting acquisition targets for me. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees, despite the fire blazing warmly in the fireplace. Ethan finally found his voice, but it clearly lacked his previous confidence and superiority. Where did you get the money? This scale of acquisition requires hundreds of billions of dollars. Aurora Holdings, I replied, enjoying the shockwave this information explosion brought. Established 5 years ago, currently managing assets exceeding $200 billion. We not only own Nexus Corp, but also most of the key links in this industry's supply chain. I pulled another list from the folder, showing a string of company names: Meridian Steel, Coastal Logistics, Pinnacle Manufacturing, Quantum Technologies. 14 companies in total, constituting a complete industrial chain from raw materials to final products. Mr. Young, the bank vice president, turned pale. My God, these are all well-known companies in the industry. Each acquisition was not random, I explained. But for this moment today, acquiring Nexus Corp to become the undisputed leader of this industry. Victor's coffee cup grew increasingly unsteady in his hands, coffee beginning to splash onto the $1,000 Irish linen tablecloth, leaving dark stains on the white fabric. Do you know what the most interesting part is? I smiled at Victor, a smile full of irony. 3 years ago, when Blackstone Dynamics faced financial difficulties, remember when Hartwell Industries suddenly withdrew that $30 million order? It was I who introduced you to Tech Global Innovative Solutions and Dynamic Systems, those 3 life-saving major clients through my network. You thought it was luck, thought it was Mr. Henderson's connections at work, but actually it was my behind-the-scenes assistance. Mr. Henderson gasped, his face turning bright red. My God, those clients were all companies in Aurora Holdings' investment portfolio, I confirmed. I simply suggested they establish business relationships with Blackstone Dynamics. But when I offered direct help at the time, what did Dad say? I turned to Victor, my voice becoming more pointed. You said, this level of business crisis is not something an emotional girl could understand. You said, let adults handle adult problems. Victor's face began to pale, his coffee cup shaking violently in his hands, coffee continuously spilling. So I understood a truth. I stood up, feeling for the first time the true height and dignity in this dining room. If I wanted to prove my abilities, I needed to reach an unquestionable level. Not just doing a little better than Ethan, not proving myself within Blackstone Dynamics, but reaching a height you could never imagine. I walked toward the French doors overlooking the snow-covered courtyard, continuing with my back to them. I needed to build a business empire so large it would make you realize your own insignificance. When I turned to face them, the entire room's power dynamic had completely changed. Those business elites who had once looked down on me were now looking up at me, waiting for my next words. Emotional, I repeated Father's earlier accusation. You consider this a weakness, but understanding human nature, building trust, creating long-term value, these so-called emotional qualities are the core secrets of my success. Victor tried to speak, but I continued. Nexus Corp's CEO Richard Steinberg was willing to sell the company to me not because I offered the highest price. In fact, 2 private equity funds offered 15% more than I did, but because he trusted that I could continue the company's vision and values. This is the true business value of emotionality that you will never understand. At this crucial moment, the coffee cup in Victor's hand could no longer hold steady. Crash. That bone china coffee cup that had witnessed 3 generations of Blackstone family glory fell to the ground with a clear and final shattering sound. Dark coffee splashed on the white marble floor like ink blossoming on rice paper, like the complete fracturing of this family's power structure. Everyone in the room was awakened by this sound, realizing that everything that had just happened was not a dream, not a joke, but harsh reality. Power had truly transferred. That daughter who had been dismissed as too emotional, that person deemed unable to handle real responsibility, now possessed the voice of authority in this industry, controlling a business empire 60 times larger than the family business. Victor looked at the fragments on the floor, those glittering porcelain pieces, each reflecting the chandelier's light. then at the acquisition document on the table that had changed everything, and finally at me, his daughter, now also the new sovereign of this industry. Do you want to discuss real business responsibility? I sat back down, but this time I commanded absolute dominance of the conversation, my voice echoing in the silent dining room. Then let us properly discuss what true business vision and strategic thinking mean. The shattered coffee cup lay on the floor like this family's old power structure, never to be restored. Snow continued dancing outside the windows, but the indoor temperature had completely changed. This was no longer Victor Blackstone's dining room, no longer his stage. This was where Arya Blackstone's era began. Chapter 2: Layer by Layer, Revelation of Truth. The sound of the shattered coffee cups still echoed in the air like thunder breaking through a quiet night sky. But no one moved to clean up those scattered porcelain fragments. Everyone was so shocked by what had just happened that they could not move, as if time had frozen at this moment. Victor stared blankly at the fragments on the floor, those porcelain remains reflecting the crystal chandelier's light, as if he could piece together from them the authority and dignity he had just lost. His complexion changed from ruddy to pale, fine beads of perspiration beginning to form on his forehead. I need some explanation. His voice was hoarse and trembling, having lost the steady composure of a business veteran. Aurora Holdings. I have never heard this name. In the past 30 years, I have known virtually every important participant in this industry, but this fund, because I did not use the Blackstone surname, I replied calmly, returning to my seat. My voice was exceptionally clear in the spacious dining room. Aurora was my grandmother's name, Aurora Catherine Whitmore. She was the only person in this family who believed in my business capabilities. I paused, letting this information settle. Grandmother Aurora was Patricia's mother, from the Whitmore family of Boston. She was a legendary woman who began investing in stocks in the 1960s, building her own investment portfolio. When she passed away, she left me her wisdom and a small startup fund. When I was 16, she told me something. Do not let the world make you small, Arya. Your mind is your greatest wealth, but only if you believe in it yourself will it have value. I pulled another thick document from the folder. This is Aurora Holdings' complete investment portfolio and acquisition history over the past 5 years. Mr. Henderson took the document with trembling hands, his gold-framed glasses scanning those shocking numbers rapidly. As someone who had worked in business for 30 years, he could understand the true meaning of these figures. Meridian Steel, acquired in 2019, transaction value $23 billion. Coastal Logistics, acquired in 2020, $45 billion. Pinnacle Manufacturing, acquired last year, $67 billion. His voice grew smaller and smaller. The total value of these acquisitions exceeds $780 billion. I completed the answer for him, enjoying this absolute advantage in knowledge. Each acquisition was not a random speculative act, but part of a carefully designed 5-year strategic plan. Each company was a puzzle piece for the ultimate goal, acquiring Nexus Corp. I stood up and walked toward the antique mirror in the corner of the dining room, adjusting my pearl necklace. Do you want to know how a too emotional woman built such a business empire in 5 years? Patricia finally found her voice, but it was as weak as a falling feather. Why? Why acquire our competitor? What good does this do you? I turned around, looking at this woman who once told me girls ultimately have to rely on marriage. She now looked so fragile, so confused. Because I wanted to prove what kind of strategic vision and business insight a person defined as too emotional actually possesses. I walked back to the dining table, but this time I did not return to my original seat. Instead, I stood at the center of the table, allowing everyone to see me. Let me paint the real business world for you. While you were discussing how to challenge industry giants in this dining room, I had already become the industry giant. While you were making 5-year development plans, I had already completed 5-year strategic arrangements. While you were still seeking $50 million in funding from strategic investors, I had already mobilized $500 billion in capital. Ethan suddenly stood up, his face flushed red, completely losing the calm and rationality typical of an MBA graduate. This is revenge. You are taking revenge on us. You are taking revenge on the entire family. His voice echoed in the dining room, carrying an almost hysterical anger. This was the first time he discovered he was not the smartest, most successful person in the room, and this cognitive upheaval was unacceptable to him. Revenge? I shook my head, showing an almost pitying smile. Ethan, this is business. Pure, rational business decisions. If I wanted revenge, I would directly acquire Blackstone Dynamics, then dissolve it, making all employees unemployed and destroying the family reputation. But I did not do that. I pulled a third document from my handbag, this one with a dark blue cover bearing Aurora Holdings' gold logo. Actually, this is the strategic investment proposal I prepared for Blackstone Dynamics. Victor looked at me puzzledly, his eyes mixing fear and hope. What do you mean? I mean, I placed the document in the center of the table, right next to those scattered coffee stains. I am willing to inject $50 million in development funding into Blackstone Dynamics, provide technology licensing from Nexus Corp, patent sharing, and global market channels, helping the company achieve true-scale expansion, from a regional small business to a national or even international brand. The table fell silent again, but this time it was confused silence, incomprehensible silence. Mrs. Morrison asked cautiously, "What are the conditions? Such a large investment must have some conditions." "No financial conditions, no controlling requirements, no management interference," I answered, my voice gentle but firm. "All I want is recognition. Recognition of the value of emotional intelligence in business. Recognition that a woman can succeed in this male-dominated industry. Most importantly, stop using outdated gender bias to define a person's abilities and worth." Victor stared at that investment proposal, his hands still trembling slightly. As an entrepreneur, he could understand the weight of this proposal. $50 million in funding, plus Nexus Corp's technology and channel support, meant Blackstone Dynamics could potentially achieve tenfold growth within 3 years. Why would you help us?" His voice carried deep confusion. "After we have treated you this way. Because despite your hurting me, belittling me, underestimating me," my voice softened, carrying mature tolerance, "you are still my family. I acquired Nexus Corp not to destroy Blackstone Dynamics, but to create a platform where we can have equal dialogue." I walked toward those scattered coffee cup fragments on the floor, crouched down, and carefully picked up a larger piece of porcelain debris. These fragments represent our old relationship, patriarchal, hierarchical, based on prejudice and misunderstanding. I stood up and gently placed that piece of porcelain on the table. But fragments can also be reassembled into something new, not the original cup, not the past appearance, but something entirely new and better. Tears began welling up in Patricia's eyes, her voice trembling. "Aria, we made serious mistakes, did we not?" "Yes, Mom." I looked directly into her eyes. "But mistakes can become starting points for growth, opportunities to begin anew." I sat back down, but this time I chose a position closer to my family, not that symbolic end. Now let me tell you how I acquired Nexus Corp, so you can understand what true business strategy means, what emotional intelligence actually means in business application. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, clearly deeply attracted by this story. As a business veteran, he understood that behind an acquisition of this magnitude must be an extraordinary story. Nexus Corp's CEO Richard Steinberg is 66 years old and has worked in this industry for 40 years. He is a technical genius, but also a thoughtful leader. I spent 8 months studying him, not studying his financial statements or business decisions, but studying the person himself. I discovered his greatest concern was not money, not life after retirement, but legacy. He worried that the company would lose its core values and innovative vision after his retirement, worried it would be dismantled or destroyed by investors who only cared about short-term profits. Mr. Young asked curiously, "So how did you approach him?" "What is the traditional acquisition method?" I looked at Ethan. "Hire investment banks, prepare detailed financial analysis, demonstrate synergistic effects, then negotiate price." But I chose a completely different path. "What path?" Ethan asked, his anger now replaced by curiosity. "Understanding and trust." I pulled a photograph from the folder. This is a photo of Richard and me at the Boston Education Foundation Charity Gala last September. I discovered he was passionate about educational charity, particularly supporting young entrepreneur projects. So I invited him to serve as an advisor for my funded youth entrepreneur program. In the photo, Richard Steinberg was a gentle elderly man with silver white hair and a kind smile, standing beside me looking like a benevolent grandfather. Over the following 8 months, we met monthly in different cities to discuss cultivating and supporting young entrepreneurs. During this process, he saw my management philosophy, saw how I treated employees, how I balanced short-term profits with long-term value creation, how I handled complex business ethical issues. When I finally proposed the acquisition, he saw not a financial investor wanting to plunder company value, but a trustworthy successor, a leader who could continue Nexus Corp's vision and values. Victor said thoughtfully, "So your emotionality was actually a competitive advantage?" "Not just an advantage," I corrected. "It is my most core business weapon. When others only see balance sheets, price-to-earnings ratios, and cash flows, I see people's motivations, needs, fears, and dreams." I opened another page of documents showing a detailed case study. Look at the Meridian Steel acquisition case. When I acquired this company, it was in trouble. Not only were the finances poor, but employee morale was extremely low. Workers were passive due to fear of unemployment. Management could not make long-term decisions due to uncertain futures. What would traditional private equity funds do? Large-scale layoffs to reduce labor costs, sell non-core assets to recover cash, then quickly flip for profit. But I chose a completely different path. Patricia asked, "What did you do?" I not only retained all employees, but provided them with skills training and career development opportunities. I established an employee stock ownership plan, making every worker a shareholder of the company. I invested in new equipment and technology, improved working conditions. "What were the results?" Mr. Henderson asked eagerly. 18 months later, production efficiency increased by 40%. Product quality reached company historical highs. Employee loyalty and innovation capabilities were released unprecedentedly. The company's annual revenue grew from $230 million to $380 million. This is the business value of emotional intelligence. It releases human potential and creates sustainable value growth. Ethan shook his head in amazement, his face showing a complex expression. I completely misunderstood the nature of business. I thought success meant being ruthless, cold, treating people as replaceable resources. This is a common misconception, I said, especially in this era that promotes wolf culture and law of the jungle. But truly sustainable success comes from creating value, not extracting value. From building trust, not manufacturing fear. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the still dancing snowflakes outside. Most ironically, you always thought I was too emotional to survive in the business world. But actually, this so-called emotionality, understanding human nature, building connections, creating meaning, is what allowed me to achieve unprecedented success in a world considered cold and ruthless. Victor suddenly spoke, his voice carrying deep regret and pain. Arya, if we had supported you from the beginning, if we had believed in you from the start. Do not assume, Dad. I turned around, looking at this once powerful and confident man. Perhaps it was precisely because of these setbacks and prejudices that I developed my current capabilities. Pain can destroy a person, making them bitter and resentful, but it can also forge a person, making them resilient and wise. I returned to the dining table, looking at each person's face. Now we need to make a choice. We can continue living in past patterns, authority, hierarchy, prejudice, misunderstanding. Or we can build a new relationship based on respect, equality, and mutual value recognition. The silence in the room was no longer shock or confusion, but deep reflection and introspection. Victor took a deep breath, then slowly said, I choose the new relationship. Arya, I apologize for my prejudice, for seriously underestimating your abilities, for the pain and injustice I made you feel. I apologize for losing 28 years of intimate relationship with a truly outstanding daughter. Patricia also nodded, tears leaving traces on her exquisite makeup. Me too, dear. We all need to relearn how to be a family, relearn how to respect each other, relearn what true success means. Ethan stood up and slowly walked toward me. His steps were somewhat hesitant, but his eyes held a sincerity I had never seen. Sister, he said, his voice trembling as he spoke the word. Can I learn from you? True learning, not as competitors, but as family? I looked at this brother who had been groomed as heir since childhood, given all expectations and privileges, feeling a surge of warmth and tolerance. Of course you can, Ethan. But first, let us clean up these fragments together. I crouched down again and began carefully collecting the coffee cup fragments on the floor. These porcelain remains sparkled like broken but still beautiful memories. One by one, others joined the cleanup. Victor removed his expensive suit jacket and crouched on the floor to help collect fragments. Patricia removed her diamond bracelet and carefully wiped the coffee stains on the floor with napkins. Ethan and the guests also participated, no one caring about status and position anymore. As we cleaned up those fragments, symbolizing the old power structure together, I knew that true reconstruction was just beginning. This was not merely cleaning up physical breakage, but clearing away psychological barriers and misunderstandings. Power had transferred, but more importantly, understanding and respect were also transferring. On this snowy Christmas Eve, the Blackstone family story opened a new chapter. Chapter 3: Establishment of New Order and Blueprint for the Future. When the last piece of porcelain fragment was carefully collected into the garbage bag, the Christmas dinner welcomed a symbolic new beginning. The food on the table remained those carefully prepared delicacies: roasted turkey, lobster, matsutake soup, French desserts. But the entire dining room atmosphere had undergone fundamental change. The taste of power, the texture of respect, everything was different. I sat back down, but this time I did not choose that seat symbolizing secondary status at the table's end. Instead, I sat on the side of the table, a position where I could have equal dialogue with everyone. I naturally became the center of conversation, not through oppressive authority, but through guiding leadership. "Now let us restart this dinner," I said, my voice gentle but full of authority. "This time, we will discuss real business cooperation and family reconstruction." Victor nodded, his posture becoming humble and focused. This man, who once dominated every conversation, now waited like a sincere student for teacher guidance. "I want to understand your strategic investment proposal, not just the numbers, but your entire vision." I opened the detailed file prepared for Blackstone Dynamics, a 50-page document containing market analysis, technology roadmaps, financial projections, and implementation plans. $50 million in funding allocated over 3 years. First year, $15 million for technology upgrades and equipment updates. Second year, $20 million for market expansion and brand building. Third year, $15 million for talent acquisition and research and development investment. I opened a detailed chart showing clear growth trajectories. The goal is to increase Blackstone Dynamics' annual revenue from $250 million to $1.2 billion within 3 years, grow employees from 800 to 3,500, expand market coverage from New England to nationwide, and establish branches in Canada and Europe. Ethan carefully studied these numbers, his MBA education enabling him to understand the basis of these projections. This investment scale is more than our entire company's annual revenue. But what are these growth predictions based on? Based on Nexus Corp's technology licensing, channel resources, and brand influence, I explained, enjoying this knowledge-sharing process. Through Nexus Corp's global supply chain, Blackstone Dynamics can gain cost advantages. Through technology sharing, it can improve product quality and innovation capabilities. Through channel cooperation, it can access high-end customer groups previously unreachable. I spread out an industry map on the table, marking various companies' positions and relationships in different colors. Look at this map. Nexus Corp dominates the high-end market, large enterprises with annual customer values above $10 million. Blackstone Dynamics focuses on the mid-market, growing companies with annual customer values between $1 million and $10 million. Add the other companies I acquired. Meridian Steel covers raw material supply. Coastal Logistics handles logistics distribution. Pinnacle Manufacturing specializes in customized production. This constitutes a complete industrial ecosystem. Mr. Henderson studied this complex chart, his business experience allowing him to see the sophistication of this arrangement. This is a vertically integrated industrial empire. From raw materials to final products, from research and development to sales, you control the entire value chain. Not an empire, I gently corrected. An ecosystem. This is a crucial distinction. Empire implies conquest and control. Ecosystem implies cooperation and symbiosis. Each company maintains relatively independent management and culture while enjoying synergistic effects and resource sharing. This is the 21st century business model. Cooperation rather than conquest, empowerment rather than control. Victor said thoughtfully, "This means Blackstone Dynamics can maintain independence. We will not become a department of Nexus Corp." "Complete independence," I confirmed. Aurora Holdings' investment philosophy is enhancement rather than replacement. I invest in growth potential, not control. You continue managing the company, making daily decisions, maintaining company culture. I provide resources, strategic support, and market access, but do not interfere with specific operations. Patricia asked curiously, "But what benefit does this have for Aurora Holdings? Why make such an investment?" "Diversified industrial layout and long-term value creation," I replied. Blackstone Dynamics has unique technical advantages and customer relationships in the mid-market, a segment that Nexus Corp cannot cover. We are not competitors, but complementary. Through cooperation, both companies can provide more complete product lines and services. Ethan pointed excitedly at a section of the chart. This way, we could truly achieve the national expansion mentioned earlier. Not just national, I smiled. Through Nexus Corp's international network and partnerships, Blackstone Dynamics can also consider overseas markets. Imagine, within 3 years, your products appearing in business centers in London, Tokyo, Sydney. This prospect excited everyone present. I could see the light in their eyes, the light of dreams becoming reality. But I raised my hand for quiet. However, these beautiful prospects are all built on one important premise. The room fell quiet again, waiting for my conditions. Honesty and respect, I said, my voice becoming more serious. Not just toward me, but toward everyone, toward employees, customers, partners, competitors. What we want to build is a business network based on values, not a machine purely pursuing profit. I looked at Victor. This means no more prejudice that women are not suitable for business. No more misunderstanding that emotional means weak. No more discrimination based on gender, age, or background. Then I looked at Ethan. This means leadership is not based on gender, birth order, or family status, but on capability, character, and contribution. Everyone has the opportunity to prove themselves. Everyone has the right to be fairly evaluated. Finally, I looked at Patricia. This means everyone has the right to pursue their dreams and potential, regardless of how traditional concepts define their roles. Support and encouragement should replace questioning and limitation. I stood up from my chair and walked to that antique mirror, seeing in the reflection a woman who was confident, strong, but also tolerant. What we want to create is not just business success, but a new corporate culture, a culture that truly respects human value and potential. Mr. Young nodded. This sounds very idealistic, but in actual operation... Let me give you a specific example, I interrupted him, returning to my seat. At Coastal Logistics, I discovered there was a cleaning lady named Maria, a single mother who worked at the company every night and cared for 2 children during the day. Traditional management would view her as replaceable low-skilled labor. But I found that Maria had outstanding organizational abilities and observational skills. She noticed many operational efficiency problems and proposed some valuable improvement suggestions. So we provided her with training opportunities to learn logistics, management, and data analysis. Now Maria is the Operational Efficiency Director at Coastal Logistics. Her annual salary increased from $25,000 to $85,000. Her 2 children have better educational opportunities, and she rediscovered her own value and potential. This is the actual effect of what I call emotional management, seeing people's potential, not just their current roles. Mr. Henderson said with emotion, "This requires completely different management thinking." Yes, I confirmed. This requires shifting from human resources thinking to human capital thinking, from cost control thinking to value creation thinking, from short-term profit thinking to sustainable development thinking. Victor took a deep breath. I accept these values. Not just accept, I want to learn how to truly practice them. Arya, can you teach me? Teach me how to become the kind of leader you describe? This request stirred complex emotions in me. This man who had once questioned my abilities was now humbly asking for my guidance. This was not a feeling of victory, but the beginning of reconciliation. Of course, Dad, but learning is a process that requires time and practice. Most importantly, you must truly believe that everyone has value and potential, including those you have previously overlooked. Patricia also said, "Aria, you taught me so much tonight. About business, about women's possibilities, about what true family means. I regret the years we lost, but I am excited about the new relationship we are about to begin." I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from successful revenge, but from the establishment of understanding and reconstruction of relationships. Then, I raised my champagne glass. Let us toast to new beginnings. Everyone raised their glasses, but this toast had completely different meaning. "To the bright future of Blackstone Dynamics," Victor said, his voice full of sincere hope. "To the redefinition and reconstruction of family," Patricia added, her eyes sparkling with tears. "To true business partnership," Ethan said, his tone carrying newfound respect. "To the courage to prove the value of emotional intelligence." Mr. Henderson also joined the toast, his words representing the thoughts of all guests present. I finally raised my glass. "To all underestimated people, to all who dare to redefine success, to all who believe in human goodness and unlimited potential." The clear sound of crystal glasses clinking was like the bell of a new era beginning. This was not just a toast, but a contract, a promise, a shared vision for the future. Dinner continued in a completely new atmosphere. This time, the conversation was equal, respectful, full of possibilities. I was no longer that problem daughter sitting at the table's end, but the key architect of this family's business future. More importantly, none of us were defined by past labels and prejudices anymore. Mrs. Morrison actively asked me about experiences and advice for women in business. Mr. Young wanted to understand Aurora Holdings' investment philosophy and strategy. Everyone showed genuine interest and respect for this new relational model. When the night grew late, guests prepared to leave. Each person actively came to bid me farewell, expressing gratitude and reflection on tonight's experience. Mr. Henderson held my hand before leaving. "Aria, tonight you changed my perspective on many things. About business, about leadership, about what true success means. Thank you for giving all of us an opportunity to rethink and learn," Mrs. Morrison added. "I have 3 daughters, and I will tell them tonight's story. They should know that nothing can limit their potential." After seeing the guests off, the 4 of us sat in the living room, firelight dancing in the room, snowflakes still falling outside, but inside was filled with warmth and hope. "Aria," Victor looked at the fireplace, his voice becoming gentle and thoughtful. "I want to ask you a question. During these past years, especially while building Aurora Holdings, did you ever hate us?" I considered for a moment, choosing to answer honestly. Yes, I did hate. Especially during the most difficult times, when I needed support and understanding but only received questioning and belittling. But hate is a heavy emotion that consumes too much energy and creativity. I chose to transform those painful experiences into motivation and wisdom. "If we had supported you from the beginning, believed in you," Patricia began, her voice full of regret, "then I might not have developed my current capabilities and resilience." I gently interrupted her. "Pain and setbacks taught me toughness, prejudice and misunderstanding taught me independent thinking. Being underestimated taught me the importance of self-proof. These experiences shaped me, making me who I am now." Ethan said thoughtfully, "So you are grateful for these difficult experiences?" "I am not grateful for the pain itself, but I am grateful for the growth and wisdom it brought me. Now we have the opportunity to create a different story, one about understanding, support, mutual respect, and shared success." Victor stood up and walked toward me, opening his arms. "May I hug my daughter?" This time not as a disappointed or confused father, but as a proud and admiring father. I stood up and accepted his embrace, feeling the first truly genuine father-daughter connection in years. His embrace no longer carried conditions and expectations, but was full of acceptance and love. Tomorrow, we begin formulating specific cooperation plans and implementation steps, I whispered in his ear. But tonight, let us just be a reunited family. Patricia and Ethan also joined this embrace, the four of us standing together for the first time truly, without hierarchy, without prejudice, only love and respect among family members. Christmas snow continued falling outside the window, but inside spring had arrived. Power had not only transferred, it had been redefined. No longer a tool of suppression and control, but a force of creation and empowerment. No longer a zero-sum game, but a platform for mutual benefit. This Christmas Eve would be remembered forever, not because of dramatic power transfer, but because of the establishment of understanding, reconstruction of relationships, and the birth of entirely new possibilities. On this snowy night, the Blackstone family story opened a new page, and this was merely the beginning of a larger story. Chapter 4: Dawn of the New Era and Infinite Possibilities. 3 months later in spring, Manhattan's sky was particularly clear. Spring sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows into the top-floor office of Nexus Corp headquarters. I stood before this massive glass wall, overlooking the entire city skyline, from Central Park's lush greenery to the Hudson River's shimmering waves, from Wall Street's skyscrapers to Times Square's neon lights. This had once been my competitor's command center. Now it was the brain of my business empire. This office had modern design, clean lines, open space, filled with natural light. Contemporary artworks hung on the walls. Business classics and philosophical works lined the bookshelves. And on the desk sat a family photo from last Christmas, that picture taken after the power shift. Everyone's expression complex, but eyes sparkling with hope's light. Aria, Blackstone Dynamics' first quarter report is out. My assistant, Emily Hartwell, knocked and entered the office. Emily was 26 years old, a Harvard Business School honors student who worked at McKinsey for 2 years before joining Aurora Holdings. She was smart, efficient, and most importantly, shared our values. Emily placed a thick report on my desk. Revenue increased 65% from $62 million same period last year to $102 million. Profit margins improved 40% from 12% to 16.8%. More importantly, employee satisfaction reached 95%, customer retention rate reached 98%. I took the report, carefully reviewing these encouraging numbers. But what satisfied me most was not the financial data, but the employee feedback and customer evaluations attached at the end. Victor and Ethan were truly practicing the new management philosophy we had discussed, their execution capabilities exceeding my expectations. There are some particularly interesting details here. Emily pointed to a certain page of the report. They implemented employee development programs similar to what we use at Coastal Logistics. 12 employees were promoted from basic positions to management or technical roles with an average salary increase of 45%. I smiled and nodded. This was exactly the change I hoped to see, not just numerical growth, but the release and realization of human value. Also, Emily continued, Fortune magazine's editor-in-chief wants to interview you, specifically to discuss female leadership and emotional intelligence applications in business. Harvard Business Review has also extended an invitation, hoping you could write a cover article about redefining business success. Schedule the Fortune magazine interview for next week, I replied, walking toward the window. I will complete the Harvard Business Review article by month's end. These are important platforms for sharing our philosophy. My phone rang, the screen showing Dad. This change in address also symbolized the transformation of our relationship, from the formal Victor to the warm Dad. Aria, I have good news. Victor's excited voice came through the phone. We just signed Millennium Technologies, a major client with an annual contract value of $20 million. Congratulations, Dad. I was genuinely happy for him. This is an important milestone. Was it introduced through Nexus Corp channels? No, he said proudly. I could hear the excitement in his voice. They approached us directly. They said they heard about Blackstone Dynamics' changes in corporate culture and wanted to establish partnerships with enterprises that value employee welfare and long-term value creation. This made me even more gratified. True success is not relying on networks or resource advantages, but gaining market recognition through improvement of one's own value. Additionally, Victor continued, I want to invite you to participate in next month's board meeting, not as an external investor, but as a strategic advisor and family member. Ethan proposed establishing a new position, Chief Values Officer, specifically responsible for corporate culture and employee development. We hope you could give some advice. This invitation was significant. A year ago, I was considered too emotional to handle real responsibility. Now I was becoming the family business's strategic advisor, and they were institutionalizing the values I had always advocated. I would be happy to participate, I replied. Chief Values Officer is a good idea. Modern enterprises need dedicated personnel to ensure consistency and implementation effectiveness of corporate values. After hanging up, I returned to my desk. Besides Blackstone Dynamics' report, there were updates from Aurora Holdings' other investment projects and preliminary analyses of several new investment opportunities. Emily knocked and entered. There is one more thing. Harvard Business School's dean called personally, inviting you to serve as visiting professor to teach a new course. Emotional Intelligence and Business Strategy. This would be Harvard Business School's first course specifically studying emotional intelligence applications in business. I stopped my work and looked up at Emily. This invitation is very meaningful. That student once considered too emotional is now returning to Harvard to teach courses about emotional intelligence. Life's ironies are sometimes truly unexpected. Will you accept? Emily asked. Of course, education is the most effective way to change perceptions. If we can plant seeds of emotional intelligence in the next generation of business leaders, then the entire business world will change. Just then, Emily smiled mysteriously. There is one more surprise today. Someone is waiting for you downstairs. I looked at her puzzledly. Who? I do not remember having any appointments this afternoon. Your family. Emily's smile became brighter. They said there is something important to celebrate. I quickly walked to the private elevator, my heart surging with curiosity and warmth. When the elevator doors opened and I entered Nexus Corp's magnificent lobby, I saw Victor, Patricia, and Ethan all there, holding champagne, flowers, and an exquisite gift box. Other people in the lobby looked curiously at this scene. These formally dressed visitors were obviously not ordinary business partners, their actions more like preparing for a celebration ceremony. What is this? I walked toward them, my heart full of warm anticipation. Celebrating your selection as Forbes Woman Entrepreneur of the Year, Patricia said proudly, her eyes sparkling with the unique pride of a mother. We just saw the news release and wanted to be the first to congratulate you. I had not expected this news at all. Forbes Woman Entrepreneur of the Year was one of the business world's most prestigious honors, with past winners including Oprah Winfrey, Sheryl Sandberg, and other business legends. We should celebrate on your turf. Victor looked around Nexus Corp's magnificent lobby, with its two-story high space, modern art installations, and flowing waterfalls. After all, this represents your achievements, your vision, your success. Ethan added, his voice full of heartfelt admiration. We want everyone to know how incredibly proud we are to have such a daughter and sister. Being recognized and celebrated by family in this place, representing the pinnacle of business power, felt more meaningful than any business success, any media coverage, any industry honor. This was what I had always longed for. Not just professional success, but family understanding and support. We came to the lobby's upscale cafe, choosing a corner spot overlooking Central Park. Victor raised his champagne glass, his gesture solemn and ceremonial. To our daughter Aria, who redefined success in her own way, redefined leadership, redefined what true business value means. More importantly, Patricia added, her voice deeply moved, she redefined our family, teaching us what true respect and love mean. Just as we were toasting, a young woman approached our table hesitantly. She looked about 25, wearing professional attire, holding a folder, her eyes carrying a mixture of nervousness and determination. Excuse me, are you Ms. Aria Blackstone? Her voice trembled slightly, but was firm. Yes, I replied gently, gesturing for her to sit down. I am Sarah Chen, working in Goldman Sachs Investment Banking Division. I have read all the reports about you, heard your story about overcoming family and industry prejudice, about how you used emotional intelligence to redefine business success. She took a deep breath. I want to say you gave me courage to pursue my dreams. I am preparing to establish my own investment fund, focusing on supporting female entrepreneurs. I looked at this young woman, remembering myself from a few years ago. The same ambition, the same uncertainty, the same longing for support and guidance. If you need any advice, guidance, or support, contact me anytime. I took a business card from my bag and handed it to her. Remember, do not let anyone tell you what you cannot do. Trust your instincts, trust your abilities, trust the power of emotional intelligence. Sarah excitedly took the card, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you. You do not know what this means to me. Having a role model like you makes me feel everything is possible. Watching her departing figure, I realized my story was already beginning to influence others, inspiring others. This ripple effect of influence was more valuable and meaningful than any personal business achievement. Do you see, Victor said emotionally, you have not just created a business empire, you are inspiring and empowering others. This is true leadership, not just personal success, but creating possibilities for others' success. Patricia nodded in agreement. This is what I now understand as true influence, not controlling others, but empowering others, not suppressing others' dreams, but igniting others' hope. As we walked out of the Nexus Corp building, spring sunshine bathed us, the entire city full of vitality and energy. A year ago at Christmas, I was told on the other end of this city that I was too emotional to handle real responsibility. Today, I stood at the pinnacle of this industry, recognized and supported by family, respected and reported by media, acknowledged and praised by society. More importantly, I was helping others discover and realize their own potential. Next Christmas, I told my family, let us hold another family dinner. But this time, let us celebrate everyone's achievements and growth, rather than discussing who deserves what responsibilities or positions. Victor smiled and replied, that sounds like a perfect new tradition. And I believe by then we will have more achievements and milestones worth celebrating. Ethan added, maybe by then we will all be students in your Harvard Business School class, learning how to become truly emotionally intelligent leaders. Patricia held my hand. Whatever the future holds, we now have the most important thing: a family relationship based on understanding, respect, and love. As we strolled along Fifth Avenue, I remembered Grandmother Aurora's words: "Do not let the world make you small, Arya. Your mind is your greatest wealth." Now I understand that true wealth includes not just wisdom and abilities, but the responsibility to use these gifts to create positive impact. Power transfer was indeed instantaneous, but real change is continuous and far-reaching. What we are building is not just business success, but a new possibility. A world where emotional intelligence is recognized and valued, an environment where female capabilities are respected and utilized, a society where family relationships are based on equality rather than hierarchy. This spring, as I stood on Manhattan's streets, surrounded by family, my heart filled with anticipation for the future. I knew this was just the beginning of a larger story. In the years to come, Aurora Holdings would continue growing, Blackstone Dynamics would realize its potential, and more Sarah Chens would create their own success stories. And I, Arya Blackstone, would continue redefining success in my own way, using emotional intelligence to build a more humane business world.